Hi, I'm S.A.Patrick, author of Darkness of Dragons. First, thanks to the organisers of the Awesome Book Awards for having my book in the shortlist for this year. And what a shortlist it is. I'm thrilled that A Darkness of Dragons is sitting alongside such a great collection of books. Thanks also to everyone shadowing the award. I certainly don't envy you having to choose a winner, but you will enjoy the process. I've been asked to read a little from the book, so I recorded the whole first chapter specially, but I thought I'd read a little something extra here. This is the story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin. When Patch was younger, his grandmother had often told him the story of the Hamelin Piper, but only when he pestered her. She preferred to tell him about the adventures of the eight as they hunted him down and caught him, rather than the horrors that had led to their quest in the first place. She would say, "I don't want to frighten you, Patch," and he would insist, "It doesn't scare me, Nan." Eventually she would give in, and Patch would thrill at the tale, but he had lied to her about it not scaring him. He knew that once she was gone, the instant the candle was blown out and the door shut, his courage would fail and he would lie in his bed and tremble, wondering when the long bony fingers of the Hamelin Piper would wrap around the door handle. She always began with the same words which, even when he thought of them now, brought back a strange combination of adventure and terror. "Have you heard of the town of Hamelin, Patch? It was once overrun with rats." Of course, every town has its rats, but one summer there were so many that the mayor of Hamelin brought in rat catchers from all around, and they did their work. In the past this had always done the trick, but not this year. At first the rat catchers were happy. The more rats they caught, it seemed, the more rats they saw, and as they were paid for each rat they killed, there was real money to be made. Then they began to grow nervous. "It's not natural," they said to one another. "We catch 1,000 a day, yet their numbers just keep rising." They began to think the town was cursed, and one by one the rat catchers left. The townsfolk were angry with the mayor for letting them leave, but what else could the mayor do? A piper. Much more expensive than rat catchers, yes, but a piper was the answer. 1,000 gold coins were raised and locked in the town treasury. By early evening the mayor was sitting in the town hall, surrounded by the most powerful people in Hamelin, writing a letter to summon a piper. 1,000 gold coins, it said, to the piper who rids us of our rats. As he was placing his seal on the envelope, the door to the hall opened wide. There stood a piper so tall and so thin that he seemed to be built entirely of edges. "I heard you had a problem," said the piper. "You did?" said the mayor, wary. He looked at the letter in his hand. "And how did you hear?" "From the 20 rat catchers I met along the road," said the piper. "But now I've arrived, and the rats will soon be gone, for 500 gold coins." The mayor nodded and tried to stop himself from grinning. 500, he thought, only 500. He carefully placed the letter in his pocket before standing, and walked over to the piper. "A hefty price," he said, looking up at the considerably taller man. "Well, if you'd rather find another piper," began the stranger. "We accept," said the mayor. He offered out his hand, and the piper shook it. The piper smiled. Those in the hall smiled back, even though they all thought that the piper's teeth seemed a little sharp and the smile a little cruel. The piper cleared his throat. From his coat he produced a long thin pipe and began to play. As he played he took slow strides out of the hall, then along the street outside. The first rats appeared from the shadows, watching him, but soon they followed in the same slow rhythm, step, step, step. More and more rats poured out from every house, every street, and by the time the piper reached the edge of the town, there was a vast shifting carpet of rats coming after him. The mayor and all the people watched this huge procession leave, cheering that the town would soon be free of its rat plague. The river Weser lay ahead, beyond the walls of the town. At the river's edge, the piper stopped walking. He raised his arms out to his sides, and the rats reached him. The townsfolk shuddered, seeing from a distance how the wide column of rats engulfed the piper, crawling up his coat and then down the other side into the water to drown. It was almost an hour before they had all completed their final journey, and the piper was revealed again. He lowered his arms and returned to the town. The townsfolk cheered and applauded. The piper took an extravagant bow and smiled. The mayor stood outside the town hall, waving to the crowd to make sure he would always be remembered for such a great success. As the piper reached him, the crowd fell silent. "My job is done," said the piper. "I will take my payment." The mayor summoned the town treasurer, who brought a bag so heavy it needed its own cart. "You have counted the coins?" asked the mayor, and the treasurer said he had. "Here is your payment," said the mayor to the piper, 500 gold coins. The piper opened the fastening at the neck of the bag and thrust in his hand. When he pulled it out, it was only sand that ran through his fingers. A shocked gasp spread through the crowd. The mayor stared at the treasurer. The treasurer stared at the bag. He darted forward and tipped the contents of the bag out. Nothing but sand. "You try to trick me?" said the piper. "No," said the mayor, terrified by the malice he saw in the piper's gaze. The mayor looked to the captain of the town guard and pointed to the treasurer. "Arrest this man," he cried, "and bring 500 gold coins from the treasury vault." The treasurer protested as he was taken away. Soon the captain returned and shook his head. "There is only sand in the vault, sir," he said. The mayor was speechless. He looked at the piper, who scowled. "I see you have a thief in your midst," said the piper. "I will return tomorrow to collect my payment." The piper turned and walked out of the town. The mayor looked to the captain. "Find the money," he said. Then he turned to his most trusted adviser. "You are now the treasurer. Raise more in case we can't find the missing coins." The next morning, the river Weser broke its banks downstream as the rat corpses blocked the flow of water. Fields of wheat and barley were destroyed. The townsfolk set about clearing the corpses and built pyres to burn them on. By afternoon the air was thick with the smoke of the pyres and the stench of burning rat flesh. The stolen money was not found. The previous treasurer had refused to admit taking it, whatever unpleasantness was done to him. In the end, the captain of the town guard stopped torturing him and concluded that he was innocent. The new treasurer, wary of the fate of his predecessor, managed to raise enough for the piper's pay, but it was difficult. When the money was gathered, it was all witnessed by trusted men of the town guard, who then stood watch over the vault. As dusk approached, the piper was seen coming along the road to town. This time the crowd was silent as he came. There was a fearfulness that was shared by all. The piper was brought to the treasury, where the vault stood closed. It had not been left unattended, not even for a moment. "Greetings, piper," said the mayor. "Greetings, mayor," said the piper. His smile seemed dangerous. "My payment?" The mayor nodded to the new treasurer. He opened the door of the vault and handed the piper the first of the bags that were inside. The piper untied it and tipped it out. "Sand!" "No!" cried the mayor. "No!" cried the treasurer. The piper shook his head, tut-tutting. "Such a terrible crime problem you have here," he said. "What are we to do?" The piper's eyes were aimed directly at the mayor, that sinister gaze drilling deep. The mayor could see a darkness there, unlimited and uncaring. He cleared his throat. "We have no more money," he said. Suspicion and fear almost overwhelmed him. He thought of how the rat catchers had been so wary of the rats, some of them believing the infestation was unnatural. He thought of the money disappearing repeatedly with no apparent culprit. He could see the suspicion in the eyes of others around him, all looking at the piper. But what could they do? People looked from the piper to the mayor, waiting for someone to speak. "Don't worry," the piper said at last, but in a voice that was far from soothing. "Tonight I will take my pay. I will take things that are often unwelcome, things that everyone at some point wishes were gone. Could I be fairer than that?" The piper turned and left. Silence filled the entire town until he was far in the distance. The mayor looked to the captain. "Ready your men," he said. "Guard the gates. Let nobody in tonight." Night came. In the distance the pyres still burned. The guards were ready. The townsfolk locked their doors. It was midnight when the sound of piping began. The music grew louder. The people of Hamelin could hear their own children stir from their beds, laughing. The children came out, unlocked the doors, and danced into the streets. The adults all found they could not move, could not even speak. They could only watch. And the piper, his eyes burning like the distant pyres, danced by each house and smiled a wide, sharp smile. And the children of the town followed him towards the town gates, dancing with unbounded joy. The gates were flung open by an invisible force, and the piper led the children out of Hamelin. It was not until morning that the townsfolk could move again. They fell to the ground, wailing in horror at what had happened. Then they ran, seeking their children, following the road, seeing where the grass at the edges had been trampled by the dancing. On and on they went until the trampled grass veered onto a smaller pathway that went up Coppin Hill. Near the top of the hill, the trail ended by a sheer face of rock. The children were not there. The townsfolk heard the sound of sobbing and found one small boy who had been lame since birth. "I couldn't keep up," he cried again and again, despairing. "Where are the others?" asked the adults. "Where are all the other children?" "He promised us a land of play with all the toys and sweets we could want," said the boy. "When the piper reached this point, a doorway opened in the rock and they all danced inside, but I couldn't keep up, I was too late." He burst into angry, desolate tears. "The door shut before I got to it." They found no sign of a doorway. In all, 130 children had been taken by the Hamelin piper. It took over a year to catch him. The piper's council assembled a group to track down this evil creature who had brought shame on their kind, a group who became known as the Eight, their exploits now legendary. When the piper was finally caught, he refused to reveal what had become of the children. Many wanted to see him die for what he had done, convinced he would never reveal the children's fate, but the council kept him alive and gave him the cruelest punishment they could devise: the Iron Mask. Fastened around the head of the Hamelin piper, it prevented him ever using his abilities again, as no magic could escape it, song or otherwise. But it had one more function. Once put in place, whatever the Hamelin piper said next would be the only thing he could ever say again, unless he was to tell where the children had gone. When the mask was fitted to the piper's head, the council addressed him. "Piper of Hamelin," they said, "do you still refuse to tell what you did with the children?" "Aye!" the Hamelin piper cried, his eyes at first defiant, but then his eyes became defeated and lost, as he finally knew that his reign of evil was ended, and the world would be forever safe from him. They locked him in the deepest, darkest place within the dungeons of Tiviscan, and "I" is still the only word he speaks, for he has never revealed where the children went.